Welcome to this edition of Labor Vision. Hi, I'm Bob Delaney, Executive Director of the Institute for Labor Studies and Research. Labor Vision, a production of the Institute, focuses on topics of importance to working Rhode Island families. This evening's edition will host Legislative Issues with Jim Parisi, where we bring the legislature into your living room. We hope you enjoy this edition of Legislative Issues and Labor Vision.
Thank you for joining us for this edition of Labor Vision, where we bring the General Assembly right into your living room. My name is James Parisi. I'm a field representative with the Rhode Island Federation of Teachers and Health Professionals, and I'm going to be your host this evening. In the previous couple of shows of legislative issues, we had a conversation with George Nee about the progress we made in the 2014 year, as well as the initiatives that the AFL-CIO and the labor movement were going to take for the 2015 session. We continue with that with another person from the labor movement, Pat Crowley. Pat, thanks for joining us.
Jim, thanks for having me.
Pat, you work for the National Education Association of Rhode Island. Why don't you start by telling our viewers who belongs to your organization?
Sure. NEA Rhode Island is one of the largest unions in the state of Rhode Island, along with our colleagues in the Federation of Teachers. We represent about 12,000 active and retired members in the state. We have classroom teachers and education support professionals throughout the state, but we also represent professional workers and faculty members at CCRI, professional staff at the University of Rhode Island, faculty and workers at some private universities and colleges in the state, but we also represent people at the municipal level and really throughout the state of Rhode Island at various levels of public service and education work in Rhode Island.
And while it's not a legislative issue, you also had a new organization join you folks last year.
Yeah, we had a very large organizing drive with the adjunct faculty at the Community College of Rhode Island. Just under 500 people voted to join NEA last April. It was one of the largest organizing wins in the country last year, and it was, really exciting to have that big of a group join.
Yeah, well, that's terrific. Congratulations.
Thank you.
And your commitment to organizing is real important for the vitality of the labor movement in the future.
Thanks. It was a team effort, by the way. I mean, your organization, our friends in the UFCW and the AFL-CIO, everyone pitched in to make this happen.
Yeah. So let's take a few minutes and talk about last year, because my thinking is last year was a pretty good year for teachers and other public sector workers.
Yeah, the best part about last year with the legislative session was a real refocusing on the rights and the role of education from the ground up. I mean, really starting with the students and what they have to do as students in their role as learning, and what the General Assembly can do with them, with the focus on high-stakes testing as a graduation requirement. I'll be quite honest with you, the teacher labor movement was late to the game on this in Rhode Island, and we learned from our friends in the Providence Student Union about how important it would be to make sure that we put a moratorium on the use of high-stakes testing as a graduation requirement. We were always focused on testing and what it did to students, and the pressure and the anxiety that it could face. But it was a pleasure to work with such an excellent group of advocates in the Providence Student Union to put pressure on all of the grown-ups in the room, including the legislators, including the teachers, including people in the other advocacy communities, to say, yeah, that's great that you understand it, but take action. It's important to make sure that the kids and students have the right and the opportunity and the time to learn, and that's not going to happen unless the state stops forcing these tests, these kneecap tests that we've talked about over the last few years, and using them as a graduation requirement. And because of their leadership, we were able to make sure that until 2017, according to the law at least, there won't be a high-stakes graduation requirement. And I think that was a tremendous victory for everyone involved in education.
And who carried the ball on those issues in the House and in the Senate?
On the House side, it was Representative Greg Amore, who's a teacher in East Providence, at the end and make sure that we carry that, as well as really the Speaker of the House and the Majority Leader, Speaker Mattiello and Leader DeSimone, who made sure that at the end we made that this carried the day. And in the Senate side, to make sure that it was the Senate President wanted to really make sure that this became a priority, as well as the people that focus on education on the Senate side, Senator Gallo, Senator Sheehan, why am I blanking on the other?
Senator Adam Satchel.
Senator Adam Satchel, I'm sorry, Senator Satchel. But the people that really care about these issues, that want to make sure that the students in particular that raised the alarm on this, to make sure that we pass this important piece of legislation.
And how about the teacher evaluation bill? That was another high-profile bill that got a lot of focus and attention.
Absolutely, and Representative O'Brien from North Providence, really led the charge on this on the House of Representatives side to put a focus on this. Teachers for the last several years have been raising a lot of concerns about the burdens that have been placed on them directly in the classroom, on the time it takes to go through a really onerous evaluation system that doesn't produce the results that I think the bureaucrats intended it to produce. A lot of data collection that gets really shoved in a drawer at the end of the day. And while there may be some merit to having an evaluation system in place, what's in place right now doesn't necessarily get the results that it's maybe intended to. What Rep. O'Brien pushed for and what was eventually enacted was a cyclical system, so that teachers that are highly effective, rated at, that are demonstrating that they're doing their jobs effectively and even highly effectively, don't have to go through this evaluation system on an annual basis and can do their jobs working with kids every single day. It doesn't mean that they don't have to talk with their principal, don't have to talk with their colleagues, don't have to talk with anyone else in the education system to say if maybe there's some improvements or changes in their practice that come along that they have to learn about. It's not like you can disappear and shut the classroom door for 4 years. But what it means is that teachers will have the time to learn and do their jobs. And those teachers who do need a little bit extra help, a little bit of review on their practice, as we call it in our field, they'll still be able to get their help, and they'll be able to focus on where they can improve their jobs. I mean, I really think it's a win-win for everyone involved, but most importantly, the system that we're here to help with, the students that are here in Rhode Island to learn.
Because the legislation provides that new teachers, the non-tenured teachers who change jobs with the change in certification, those folks are still going to get their evaluations this year. Right,
absolutely. I mean, when you get into the nuts and bolts of the legislation, the concerns that people had about who's going to be evaluated, who's not, the sponsor of the bill, Rep. O'Brien, worked with all the advocates in the community to say, let's make sure this works, because we want to demonstrate that it's not about this policy or that policy. It's about finding an evaluation system that benefits, the system. Yeah.
Well, and one last thought on that: the legislation by Rep. O'Brien and Senator Goodwin, like the bills on standardized tests, really passed with overwhelming margins, didn't they?
They really did, and I think that shows that teachers' voices, students' voices, parents' voices were really heard loud and clear last year by the General Assembly. And that's refreshing.
It sure is. So, we're in 2015. We've got a new legislative session. We have some new faces in the building. We have a new governor. What are you looking at as far as legislative priorities for your members and the people you represent and the programs that your members work in?
So our legislative agenda is going to be focused again on what's in the best interest of kids and learning, and for the state of Rhode Island as a whole. I mean, with our members touching so many different areas of the state, it's funny how many things that we get involved in. Primarily right now in the early stages of the General Assembly session, we're paying particular focus to Representative O'Grady's commission in the House of Representatives, looking at the fair funding formula as it relates to charter school funding and career and technical education. Back when the fair funding formula was established in 2009 and became effective in 2010, there were a lot of statements made that, this is the first step, we'll get this enacted, but we know we have to revisit it in a few years, but that's never really been done. It's well time that we look at what I would call holes in the system as it relates to how charter schools are funded, how career and technical education is funded, just to make sure that what we attempted to do back, 5 years ago now, doesn't starve local communities of needed funding. There's some interesting testimony that's taken place so far, especially in areas in the Blackstone Valley, where I know both of our unions represent local communities, about how the interplay between the funding in the sending communities, schools like Lincoln and Cumberland that send kids to charter schools, the formula isn't working as it was intended maybe. So if that's the case, how do we fix it so that the system doesn't collapse under its own weight? But I know that my members that work at Davies, which was a blue ribbon school, it's doing great work in the career and technical education area, they also have concerns to make sure that the specialized education that they provide, that sometimes is a lot more costly than a traditional high school that you might find that doesn't provide career and tech education, how do they make sure that they're not getting shortchanged by the funding formula?
Sure, and that study commission is meeting already, and do you think that they're going to come up with some recommendations that'll impact this year's education budget?
I sure hope so. I mean, I know that the representatives and the participants on it are, forthright and coming at it with the best attitude. Even if they're not coming at it from the same point of view all the time, I know everyone on that commission is coming at it, with the best intentions.
Sure. So what else is on your agenda?
So what we're really hoping to do is figure out how we can work with people like Senator Gallo in the Senate to make sure that all-day K becomes a reality across the state of Rhode Island. It's one of the things that should just be a no-brainer to make sure that all-day K happens. If we can make sure that all-day K is just considered, universal in Rhode Island, that would be important. So there's that. But also, it doesn't necessarily relate to the Rhode Island General Assembly, but one of the key issues right now that we're working with in Rhode Island goes back to where we started the conversation, is testing. And at the federal level, they're reviewing right now the Elementary Secondary Education Act, which is talking about the high-stakes testing that is required at the state level by the federal government. And we're doing a lot of work with our members looking at what the federal government requires the state of Rhode Island to do for testing in the high-stakes testing level. So our members are actively engaged with Senator Whitehouse's office and talking with their other members of Congress to make sure that when the Senate in particular, but all of the federal Congress, looks at how high-stakes testing impacts kids and teachers in Rhode Island, there's a little bit more of a fair system in place for it. So it's a wide range of issues. And
again, it's an issue that's not just about teachers. That one's about how we educate kids, what students feel, what benefits students, and clearly there's now a backlash against this over-reliance on standardized tests in this country. Absolutely.
I mean, as a parent of a Rhode Island public school kid, and as someone who deals with this not just from a working person's point of view, but as a dad of a kid, going through NECAP last year and now PARC, having to review those documents from a first-hand point of view. I live this stuff every day for work, and I get confused at it when my son brings this stuff home. I can just imagine someone who's not familiar with all these regulations and policies having to navigate this system. Something's got to change.
Sure. So we only have another minute or so left. Any final thoughts on what you think you're going to be working on this year?
Well, I think, the good thing about Rhode Island and the labor movement that we have is we're such a close-knit community. I'm excited, hearing what Brother Nee was talking about with the economic development plans that we have, starting from the ground up with raising the minimum wage. There's nothing that is a better anti-poverty program than a job that pays a living wage. and 10.10 an hour that I know Representative Bennett has put in co-sponsored by a lot of the new representatives that we got elected last year. That's a great way to start to make sure that, you know, all of us in the labor movement, public sector, private sector, can work on. I'm looking forward to making sure that we get more progress in that this year.
That's terrific. Patrick, you've been very generous with your time. Thank you for coming on the show and telling our viewers you know, what you'll expect yourself and others to be working on this session.
Thanks, Jim.
And thank you for joining us for Labor Vision.
Today is March 19th, and it's going to be a day that everyone remembers. This is Women's History Month, and we're going to try to make history for women here at the Rhode Island State House. Behind me is a coalition made up of labor, community, faith, representatives, and business who all believe that 10% of Rhode Island's population has been left behind and needs to be part of our society in total. Currently, tipped workers are only paid $2.89 an hour. They face rates of discrimination and harassment that is the highest of any industry in the country. They use almost $700,000 worth of food assistance in Rhode Island, and they suffer rates of poverty 1.5 times that of other industries. This is something that a society that cares about people cannot be let happen. Maureen Martin, the Secretary-Treasurer of the AFL, always posts at the end of her emails, she says, "It is in the shelter of each other that we all live." This coalition is providing shelter and protection for the women who can be intimidated when they come to speak, who can be too frightened because of retribution, and can be too fragile to actually come forward. So these people behind me are lending their voices. So we're going to go through our speakers really quickly. I would like to invite Representative Teresa Tanzi to come speak to the issue. Oh, I'm sorry. Take that back. I'm going to introduce the bill sponsor, Aaron Regenberg, first, and then Gail Golden in Senate. Thank you.
Hello, as Mike said, my name is Aaron Regenberg, and I want to thank everyone for coming out. I'm very excited to be here today to welcome the many coalition partners who have joined together to say that 20 years is long enough and the time has come to raise Rhode Island's sub-minimum wage. I think it's valuable to start this conversation with a little historical context. In 1996, when I was just 6 years old, the regular minimum wage in Rhode Island was $4.45 an hour, and the tip minimum wage was $2.89 an hour. Today, nearly 20 years later, the regular minimum wage is $9 an hour, and the tip minimum wage is still just $2.89 an hour. That translates into real hardships for a lot of Rhode Islanders who face frequent instability and economic insecurity. According to the most recent Bureau of Labor Statistics report, the average hourly wage, including gratuities, for tipped workers in Rhode Island is $8.90. As Mike said, tipped workers have higher poverty rates and are twice as likely to be on food stamps as non-tipped workers in our state. That's the reality. And that's why Senator Golden and I have introduced legislation in the House and the Senate that would provide a measure of added security to thousands of hardworking Rhode Islanders by gradually raising the sub-minimum wage, starting with a bump to $4.50 in 2016. Now, I could go on, but we have a lot of folks here today who bring a number of diverse perspectives on this issue. So I will pause here to let others discuss why they think it's so critical that the General Assembly pass this legislation. Thanks again.
And with that, we're announcing the formal formation of the One Fair Wage Coalition. Now I'd like to invite Senator Golden to say a few words about it.
Thank you. I am delighted to be here, and it is incredible to see the coalition of people who are joining Representative Regenberg and I in ensuring that some of our lowest wage workers in the state are seeing a raise for the first time in 20 years. When I first learned that we had been raising the minimum wage without also addressing the tip minimum wage, I was a little bit surprised and started researching it. And one of the things that I came across was research from the National Women's Law Center that talked about how this is actually also about the gender wage gap, because we are creating an institutionalized difference in our minimum wage, because so many women make up the majority of tipped workers in our state and across the country. I am delighted that there are people here who are advocating on behalf of tip workers and have come together for the first time really to talk about this issue. I know for myself that I've never once thought that when I was leaving somebody a tip, it was what was going to actually pay their rent or put food in their child's mouth. It was my way of saying thank you for great service. What I think we really need to realize is that when we put more money in people's pockets, our economy keeps going. And this is a way to ensure that more people in the state have more money in their pockets, can buy those groceries, pay rent, and ensure that their kids are well cared for. So thank you very much for joining us today, and thank you to all of our coalition members for joining us.
It's vital that we remember that solidarity is a central principle of everything we do. And with that, George Nee is probably the best expression of that. So I'd love if George Nee came up and said a few words about this.
We are very proud to be a part of this coalition. On behalf of the Rhode Island AFL-CIO, we have been fighting for years to raise the minimum wage. It has been unfortunate that that has not applied to the men and women who work very hard in the hospitality industry and depend on tipped wages. We believe that there is tremendous abuse where people in some cases don't know that they have a right to the minimum wage and should be paid the minimum wage by their employer if they don't make it as a result of the tips. And we are firmly committed that there has to be economic justice and social justice for everybody. This group has essentially worked in the shadows of our economy. It's about time that they are brought out into the sunlight of our economy, and the sun is out today, which is very nice for a change. And we are committed to make sure, again, that in our state, economic justice applies to everybody. So with that, again, we're proud to be part of this coalition, and let's move forward. Thank you.
I'm not really bringing props with me. You know, we've heard from labor and we've heard from reps, but I think it would be helpful if we heard from the business community. So I'd like to invite Andy Posner from the Capital Good Fund to speak a few words about this issue.
Thank you. So I'm the founder and CEO of Capital Good Fund, and we're a nonprofit that does financial services for low-income families, including one-on-one financial and health coaching and small loans. And as such, I think about this in terms of a budget. So when we sit down with a family, and we do this all the time, and we see that they make $2.89 an hour plus tips, we can't do an accurate budget because we don't know how much they're going to bring in. Some weeks they bring in enough, some weeks they don't. And as a result, they have to resort to high-interest loans. They have to resort to pawning their items. They have to resort to going to friends and family or doing without. This isn't just a moral issue, it's an economic one, as has been mentioned before. Our families that we work with don't have savings, they don't have bank accounts, they don't have good credit, and it's because of their financial instability and their lack of a secure income that they can budget. If they know how much they're going to make, they can invest in the local economy, they can invest in themselves, they can invest in their families. So by getting rid of the two-tiered wage system, we can then sit down with families to build budgets that make sense for them, for their families, and for the state. Thank you.
It's important that we make sure that everyone's voice gets heard. So I'd like to invite Meg Fosk of Restaurant Opportunity Centers United to come speak to this issue.
Thanks, Mike. So first I want to thank Representative Regenberg, Senator Golden, and Representative Williams for their leadership on this issue. What an inspiring coalition, an inspiring group of people that we've built. This is an issue whose time has come. An entire classification of the workforce should not be left out of earning a fair minimum wage. The sub-minimum wage for tipped workers of $2.89 creates poverty and it creates inequality. It's justified based on a myth that tipped workers are earning so much, servers, bussers, runners, and bartenders earn so much in tips that it more than makes up for the fact that they earn a base wage of just $2.89 an hour. For the vast majority, that's just not true. Tipped workers live in poverty at nearly 2 times the rate of the rest of the workforce here in Rhode Island and rely on food stamps at double the rate. Now think about that for a second. That means that the people that put food on our tables in restaurants often can't afford to put food on their tables at home. Now, because the vast majority of tipped workers are women, about 70%, this poverty burden falls on them. The sub-minimum wage for tipped workers is in effect a legislative pay inequity for a female workforce. Women who are mothers, many of them single mothers, and rely on tips that fluctuate based on shift, based on time of day, based on weather, to support themselves and their families. And it's not just an economic issue, because when you force a female workforce to rely on tips for their income, what they have to do is curry favor from customers in order to make a living. And what this does is exacerbates already the highest levels of sexual harassment in any industry. Because the customer's always right, so whatever inappropriate touches or comments the customer makes, the server has to put up with, because it's a choice between making a living and standing up for yourself. Now, there's a pretty easy solution to this. It's not a radical solution. It's something that's in existence in 7 states in the United States right now. One fair wage, the same minimum wage for all workers, tipped and non-tipped. Over 1 million workers on the entire West Coast and Nevada are already working under this system. And you know what? Not surprisingly, tipped workers are doing better. Lower poverty rates, lower gender wage gap, lower race wage gap. But you know what? Businesses are too. In these states where the minimum wage is the same for tipped and non-tipped workers, there's higher per capita sales in the restaurant industry, higher employment growth in the restaurant industry, and within the classification of tipped workers, and menu prices are not higher on average. It's time for one fair wage here in Rhode Island. It's time that all workers are guaranteed a fair minimum wage under the law. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us for this edition of Labor Vision. We appreciate your input and encourage your comments. Labor Vision can be seen on this channel 3 times each week: Tuesday at 7 p.m., Thursday at 8 p.m., and Saturday at 5 p.m. We hope you enjoy this edition of Legislative Issues and Labor Vision.
Thank you for joining us for this edition of Labor Vision, where we bring the General Assembly right into your living room. My name is James Parisi. I'm a field rep with the Rhode Island Federation of Teachers and Health Professionals, and I'm your host this evening. The last show we taped was a review of the 2014 year as far as the AFL-CIO, the labor movement, and working people. And this year, this session is a new one, 2015. The session is just starting. And we thought we'd bring George Nee back into the studio to talk about what the plans are for this year. George, thank you for joining us.
Oh, my pleasure. And thanks again for your service to the labor movement by hosting this show.
That's what happens when you volunteer in this business one time. It turns into a
people
5-year
say, hey,
commitment.
He's doing a good job. Let's leave him there.
All right, so we had a good year last year, as we just talked about. But what do we have on tap for projects that the labor movement is working on in 2015?
Well, let me just start off by saying that I like to put this in some framework, but we look at the labor movement's agenda as the people's lobby. People, I think, unfairly categorize the labor movement as a self-interest group, or all these terms that people throw around, special interests, and we just don't buy that, because our agenda is to fight for improvements in people's working conditions, health and safety conditions, health insurance, education, taxes. So our agenda is pretty broad. And oftentimes some of the things that we advocate for benefit non-union members as much as union members, and in some cases even more than union members. But it's all part of building a fair and just economy. So,
and I would add to that, because of where many union members work, we're also advocating for the clients, the consumers. I mean, teachers are involved in student issues. The providers of services to the developmentally disabled are advocating for programs, not just their own pay and benefits. So there's always the broad interest that we have.
There's a link, because people have relationships, and that's what makes for a strong community and hopefully for a strong economy. So we'll start off. The fight for the minimum wage is still an ongoing challenge.
Now, it was remarkable that last year you got a significant $1 an hour raise,
right,
a year after the wage went up in 2013.
Right. So we're going to try to do that again, but we're going to try to do 10 cents better. Our goal this year is to get the minimum wage up to $10.10 on January 1st of 2016. The reason we're looking at that is we want to stay consistent with our two neighboring states, Connecticut and Massachusetts. Both of them have already passed legislation that their minimum wage will go up to 10 or 10.10 on January 1st. So we just think it would be a matter of equity for Rhode Island to keep up with them. And I just want to share this just amazing statistic to put it into some perspective. Not that we want to pick on Walmart, but they are a notoriously anti-union, unfair to workers company. But the CEO of Walmart, you may not know him, his name is Michael Duke. He received $5,643.677 last year in compensation. $5,643,000. That means he made $2,713 an hour. $2,713 an hour. So if you're the minimum wage worker that works for Walmart at $9, you have to work 300 hours to make what he makes in an hour.
Right.
So the average compensation worker to pay ratio in Rhode Island is one of the worst in the country, 460 to 1. So this is a matter of fairness, it's a matter of equity, and it's a matter of building the economy from the bottom up. You put money in workers' wages in their pockets, they spend the money in the economy, it helps the small business community. I was actually very encouraged, the last 2 articles that happened this year, they interviewed a lot of business owners, and particularly in the nonprofit sector and in the retail sector. And the owners of these establishments recognized that. They said it's not fair to have people make those kind of wages, and we benefit when people do that. So that will be a challenge for this year.
As an aside, there is some talk in the State House about maybe some cuts to social service programs, which is yet to be delivered. But what better way to promote, the economic well-being of low-wage workers than just raise the minimum wage so they can, provide work, provide a service, but also make enough money so maybe they don't need all the social service programs.
Well, I think that's always been the goal is to, if there's more people can work at a decent wage level, then we'll have the resources needed to take care of the people that always needed to be taken care of. But we can't have a huge number doing that, taking care of, because we just don't have the resources to do it. So you're right, the more people we can get into the workforce, the better. Other issue that we're very concerned about is our friends from the mayoral academies. These are the, I call them the charter schools on steroids. For some reason, people have decided that mayors know more about education than they know about plowing streets. So I think that it'd be better if they spent their activity on the other stuff. But they've all become experts in education. They created this entity called mayoral academies. But here's what they did. So you don't have to be part of the pension system. So you can go to work there, we'll decide what to do with you, but you don't have to be part of the pension system. And you don't have to be subject to the prevailing wage law. So if we build a building there, even if it's with public funds, you're exempt. We feel that's inherently unfair. The people who work the mayoral academy should be in the pension system the same way the public school teachers are and the people in the charter schools are. And it would benefit our pension system and it would be equitable for everybody.
It sure is unfair when regular public school districts and independent charters have to contribute to pay off, this pension debt that we've created over decades.
And they just get a free ride. And they don't, they say that we'll put them in a 401k. They're not obligated to. They can do whatever they want.
They can.
Also, we're very concerned about this school choice issue, this little movement that's starting to say people should be able to send their kids anywhere they want. That's a bunch of nonsense. This country was built on the public education system, and we've got to expose those people for the myths that they're perpetuating and the fraud that they're trying to perpetuate on people.
Yeah, it looks like this corporate-funded group, the Center for Freedom and Prosperity, is going to try and foist school vouchers on Rhode Islanders. Yeah. I was heartened to hear comments from both the House leadership as well as the Senate leadership reaffirming their commitment to public education.
Yeah, and I think we could look. The best thing that group could do is tell us how they get their money and where it comes from, and they hide behind this good government group and they're into all this transparency except for their own group, which they don't want to tell anyone what they're doing. So, that's obviously a concern.
Sure.
Just a little bit on the defensive. Well, actually, we have a terrific system in Rhode Island called TDI, Temporary Disability Insurance. We have some groups out there that want to dismantle that or change it fundamentally. We will oppose that. The TDI system has worked very, very well. It puts a lot of money back into the Rhode Island economy. It's paid for by the workers. I've been in this job since 1983, not as president, but working for the AFL-CIO. Since 1983, I've never heard one group of union members or one group ever come to us and say, we've got to do something about the TDI system. We don't want to pay money out of our pocket. People understand how valuable it is. We'll fight to keep that.
And Rhode Island was able to join the small list of states that now provide some short-term temporary caregiver insurance. Gail Golden, senator from the East Side, came on our show to talk about it. That program wouldn't be available if we didn't have a TDI system.
And it's a social insurance program, so you can't say, people can buy it if they want. There's an advantage like Social Security and unemployment insurance when it's a social insurance program, not just something that you can get. Because some employers may not even offer it if it was voluntary. Another issue related somewhat to that is efforts to try to restrict or eliminate unemployment benefits for what they are referring to as seasonal workers, which they're not defining, but we define it. It could mean hotel workers, landscapers, restaurant industry, certainly construction industry. These are people that are working. You collect unemployment based on how much you've earned. And they're trying to just take whole groups of people and take them out of the unemployment system. So we'll be fighting against that. One of the things that we're looking at this year is we've had a lot of discussion about the independent contractors versus regular, legitimate employees versus when people are misclassified as independent contractors. And right now we have a registry for independent contractors. It's at the Department of Labor Training. It's only for workers' comp. We want to move that registry to, they only register now once, that's it. So if you registered as an independent contractor in 1995, that's the only time you have to do it. We want to move that from the Department of Labor and Training to the Department of Revenue and have a $50 yearly fee to register as an independent contractor. There are legitimate independent contractors. They should register the same way that independent business or independent contractors do if they run a business or other professionals. If you are one, fine. Pay a fee yearly, register up there, put your social security number on the form, and now the registry, Department of Revenue can check to make sure that you're really an employee, really an independent contractor and not an employee. We think that'll bring in a lot of revenue to the state of Rhode Island and end the cheating that's going on.
Because there's more enforcement if they're under the Department of Revenue.
I think people would think twice about going up there and saying, I am really an independent contractor and I'm willing to state my name and sign an affidavit to that, knowing full well that you'll be checked.
Sure.
So that could do a lot, because we still have an underground economy. When times are tough, people, and by the way, it comes from both sides. Sometimes the worker figures it's a way to get money in their pocket, cash, not report. Sometimes the employer does it, and then they get a competitive advantage versus the good employers who are playing by the rules. So that's something that we think we've been dealing with this issue for many, many years, and this benefits, again, business and labor, protects the worker and protects the good employers. Yeah. So that's a good one.
George, unfortunately, we're running out of time. I think we've only touched the surface
I never run out of issues
of our labor agenda. But we're going to have some follow-up shows with some other labor leaders to talk about labor's agenda. And then this year, as we have for 4 years now, we're going to bring in the senators and reps who put in bills that assist the working person right here into the studio so that they could tell what their interest is and what they're trying to get accomplished. George, thanks for coming in.
Thank you.
Welcome to this edition of Labor Vision. I'm Bob Delaney. Over the last many shows and over the years, we've had a number of discussions about wages and inequity and the role of both women and men in organized labor. I'm very pleased today to welcome two very wonderful ladies, Maureen Martin, who is the Secretary-Treasurer of the Rhode Island AFL-CIO, and Abby Godino, who is a research person with the New England Region Council of Carpenters. And so ladies, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Bob.
I'm looking forward to this discussion. We've had some preliminary discussions, and I think it's a thought-provoking discussion. I think there's a lot of good topics at the table. Maureen, you're responsible for starting a new chapter of an organization called CLUE, addressing women in labor. Thank you for doing that, but can you tell us what it is?
Sure. Are you clueless about it?
I have a little bit of knowledge.
So CLUE, which is C-L-U-W, is the Coalition of Labor Union Women. It's a national organization that was founded a little over 40 years ago when a few emerging labor leaders decided that women didn't have a real voice within the labor movement. And they came out of the feminist movement and were just lucky enough to be involved in the labor unions, and they made a few call-outs, and 3,000 women showed up in Philadelphia, and it was a great time. And not that I was there, but it was a great time that women were able to kind of get together and get this organization on its feet. And since then, it's become one of the 6 groups that work within the AFL-CIO. All right.
There's
so
more than 40.
All right. 6 groups.
Okay, you know what? Let's pick up on one line.
All right. What did I want
There's
to talk
54
about?
international national unions
But
represented.
they're one of the
Stay away
the
from
constituent group.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Stay away from figures
Beautiful.
and facts, 'cause
Okay.
Yeah, and you know.
Stay away from what?
Okay, so
Figures and
listen, why
facts.
don't we,
Oh,
you know
figures
what's better than splicing it? You want to go again? It's easy.
Oh, okay. We're new into it.
Yeah.
We're getting booted out at 4.
Oh, okay.
Okay, we will do this
We can
first
do it.
run.
We
Okay,
can do it.
you ready?
Yes.
Show me the red light, and we're off and running. Welcome to this edition of Labor Vision. I'm Bob Delaney. Over the last many years, Labor Vision has focused on issues that we believe are important to working Rhode Islanders, and those issues such as wage equity and equality are still in the forefront for organized labor. So we're taking the opportunity in this show to have a conversation with a couple of experts. We have 2 very knowledgeable ladies with us in this show, Maureen Martin, who is the Secretary-Treasurer of the Rhode Island AFL-CIO, and Abby Godino, who is a researcher with the New England Regional Council of Carpenters. And Abby, I can't wait to get to the researcher and the carpenters here, because I don't think it's talking about 2x4s.
No.
But anyway, Maureen, let's get started. Let's have a conversation. We had some preliminary conversation before the show about an organization called CLU, addressing women in labor. And I know that women have been involved in labor for many, many years, but you're instrumental in starting this organization in Rhode Island now. What is it and why now?
Sure. So CLU is the Coalition of Labor Union Women, started about 40 years ago when a group of women who were working within their labor unions thought they didn't really have a way of talking about their women's issues. And so they did a shout out to some other labor union women and had 3,000 people show up, and thus became the Coalition of Labor Union Women, which is a constituent group within the AFL-CIO. And I would say in the 1990s, we had a chapter in Rhode Island, and it was very instrumental in training women for leadership within their unions, supporting women in their workplaces, and teaching them how to have a voice at work and stand up for themselves, and to become more politically involved in politics. And we haven't had that chapter organized for some time, and it just seems that now is the time where there's this national conversation going on about low-wage workers, and they're predominantly female workers in many of the groups of workers who are challenged every day to make a minimum wage even. And so last year, a few of us started talking, and we didn't get 3,000 people show up, but we've had a good show up of, I would say, about 40 women in Rhode Island from 15 different labor unions and organizations. And we're really looking forward to getting chartered next month, and I'm very proud to be the interim president of the chapter. And we hopefully, I think one of the things that I'm hoping is that this will be a vehicle to bring younger women into the labor union community and kind of move them up and give them a voice within their labor unions, at their workplace, and politically.
And I think it's so important to do that. I think organized labor has made a real commitment to education and training of everybody, whether it be union leadership or members of the various unions, in an attempt to provide that level playing field and give people the opportunity to bring about new and innovative programs, to be educated, and to ensure the equality within organized labor in the corporations and the businesses that we work in.
Yeah.
You asked Abby to come along with you today, which was a good choice.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Abby, a little bit about the work that you do. I'm really interested in hearing about the research component. From the Institute's point of view, the Institute for Labor Studies and Research, we really tend to focus on building programs based upon research, based upon what people need, and based upon what society and the changes in technology. You and I have had some preliminary conversations, and it's interesting to listen to the research work that you do that is involving carpenters and looking at who they partner with. Just tell us what you do.
It's very interesting that you say that. When I first came to work for the carpenters, it was research that I relied on from people before me that really integrated me into knowing how a trade labor union works, which was new for someone, even though I've had experience and really enjoyed the labor movement. As a researcher, there's a lot of facets to my job. I think one of the most interesting, though, is that when a project comes down the line, there's a lot of actors involved, and a lot of the times those are, state agencies giving out tax credits and money. And so we take a look at who the developers are in these projects, if they're receiving money, if they're women minority-owned businesses, if they're local businesses, so that we can have the play to make sure that local people get put to work and that we know that high-quality labor standards are met when compensating these workers. So that's just one part, and the more exciting part, I think, of my job is it's research, but it's more based in what's happening in the community, finding other organizations to partner with, groups like CLU, where we can steer our members towards getting more involved inside and outside of their union, just so that we can build stronger communities in Rhode Island.
And I think those partnerships are so critical in not just the development of organized labor, but the work that we do, organized labor and non-organized labor, in growing our community and community-based organizations.
Yeah, no, that's right. There are a lot of organizations, or I work with contractors out there that want to do the right thing, want to build clean and legal and partner with the community. But if the community is not there to answer, or the workers, organized or not organized, aren't there to answer, then the call is going to be lost. And it's been a discussion for many years about how do we address unemployment and lack of training. So I think these partnerships, like you said, are a great way to figure out what the workforce can offer, but what does the industry need. So making those connections is really vital.
Maureen, over the years you've been involved in creating and developing and growing partnerships with anywhere from the partnership between organized labor and the Salvation Army for the drive at Christmas, a whole variety of partnerships that you've been involved in. It would appear to me that the organization CLUE is not limited. It's for women in organized labor, but it sounds like you have a strong base of members, both male and female, it sounds like,
it is.
who are representative of a broad base of unions, but really have a basic interest in looking at the role of organized labor, but also females in the community.
Yeah. So CLUE is not limited to just labor union folks, that we have women and men who are not actual union members, who are associate members of the coalition. And I think that is part of our effort to reach out, just as you mentioned, that labor unions have been very responsive to the whole need of hearing women leaders, and to reach out to unorganized workers and into the community. And I think absolutely that the Coalition of Labor Union Women will have that as a high priority, reaching out and being involved in organizing unorganized women, and looking at workplaces where we might have something to offer, where women are being disenfranchised, and where wage discrimination and other gender-based inequities are happening on a daily basis at their workplace. Well, we'll be able to kind of reach in, and if we can't organize them, we can at least work with them and teach them, maybe give them some leadership skills to learn how to stand up on their own, and we'll be there behind them.
And I think more often than not, it's even taking a look at the resources that are available and directing people to those resources. In light of that, Abby, you are one of the members of the class of 2015 in the Institute's Leadership for a Future. I know you think it's a wonderful program. I'm not going to ask you that question, but in all seriousness, how important is it for anybody, females or males, but in particular in this conversation, for females to have the opportunity to be a part of a leadership group with the interaction among all of the people who are there from the diverse pieces of the community, organized labor, community-based organizations? How important is it to you, and how important are those pieces in particular in your role as a researcher? How do you see it fitting?
It is so vital. I grew up in South County, and I like to say that I was always interested in social justice and economic justice, and I didn't know how to get involved. There's not a lot of activism in South County. It's a different world than being up towards Providence and then the city. So it took me a long time to find people that had the same values, and even organizations that were working towards those things. So for any time that you can get a room together of people who are already leaders or emerging leaders in their organizations, who are willing to listen to each other and learn from each other, that's how we really get stronger networks. And so how this translates to my job as a researcher, I find out this church might be building a new facility for low-income renters. It might be a great opportunity for the carpenters to get involved in that project, put our members to work, but also take members from that community and integrate them into our apprenticeship program to get them high-road jobs. So there's an unlimited way that these connections can benefit us all. So it's really
well, and I think in many ways, Maureen, you'd be familiar with these, where organized labor has really made an attempt to be outwardly participatory in community activities, not just in organizing and on issues of concern in the community, but even when it comes to the skilled technical trades and the role that they play in voluntary construction of ramps and other places within the community.
It's been incredible. I actually wrote an article about it a couple of years ago, all of the things that labor union folks do that benefit people in the community, nothing to do with our labor sisters and brothers. And building the ramps was a great story from the carpenters, coincidentally. Even we'll be going, we're starting a new chapter in that book today. We're sending out something, recruiting our AFL-CIO and our broader community of union support folks to come join in the effort to dig people out of the snow. You know, there's a group called Serve Rhode Island that 2 major Rhode Island labor leaders are on the board of. One is Michael Downey from Council 94, who chairs that board at Serve Rhode Island, and Frank Flynn from the Rhode Island Federation of Teachers, who is the vice chair. And we had this notion that, considering the relentless weather we've been suffering, if not everybody thinks all the snow is suffering, but that we've been experiencing at any rate, we thought, wouldn't it be great to get the union people that we know are out there every day doing all kinds of things to benefit people in the community, and we could sign them up for Team Union Yes and get them out there working this. I know that this group has had a lot of volunteers, and they've done a great job, as I understand, but they're running out of volunteers. They're running out of time. Those folks have worked over and over and over again, and we have a couple more storms coming up. So labor union folks are the ones who are going to be jumping in and taking care of that problem. But it's what they always do. It's what we do.
And I think they have for a long time. I think most people in the community are probably not aware of the kind of projects that are taken by members of organized labor. In some cases, it's the Carpenters Union. And you know, Abby, it might be worthwhile for you to talk about just some of those initiatives, because I think what ends up happening, you're seeing the link here between CLU and those other organizations where CLU will provide, like you say, the tentacles into those other activities.
Yeah, so the Carpenters all over New England are involved in lots of great activities. One I love is every year in Boston we help children build lemonade stands from children from disadvantaged areas in schools, so that they have an entrepreneurial activity where they learn to sell lemonade. Another that's really popular everywhere is building beds. There's a lot of shelters that do not have enough beds for people, and that's just one way that we can contribute. I think the most important thing to know is there's always this message that the union isn't someone from your community, but the members of unions are people from these communities, these very same communities. So they're no different than you and I, and just going out to help each other is the one way that we connect.
Well, I think it's really important that you said that, because sometimes members of unions and people who are not members of unions talk about the union. And in reality, it's not a thing. It's the people who make it up. So I think it's really important for us to recognize that, and to recognize the work that Maureen, you're doing in attempting to try and get a greater number of people involved in CLU, so that the activities in the community will be more linked to it, so that people in organized labor will grow and develop those relationships. For people out there, if they wanted to become a member of CLU, what should they do?
If you'd like to join the Rhode Island chapter, there's a first step, which is to join CLU National Organization. If you go to clu.org, there should be a little spot on the right where you can just click onto membership and go on and pay your $35 new membership dues, and I will get notified that you've become a member of CLU, and I will recruit you to be on the Rhode Island chapter.
I want to thank both Abby and Maureen for coming today. It is a long conversation that deserves much more time, and hopefully in the future we'll have the opportunity to do that. Forward to a conversation again.
Great, thank you very much.
Bye.
Thank you for joining us for this edition of Labor Vision. We appreciate your input and encourage your comments. Labor Vision can be seen on this channel 3 times each week: Tuesday at 7 p.m., Thursday at 8 p.m., and Saturday at 5 p.m.